Welcome to the Silver Screen Guide podcast, where we discuss films from every genre. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. All right, welcome back to our second Silver Screen Guide look back, or what we like to abbreviate, he called it, the SSG Lookback series. This is a new series. Maybe you're just jumping in on this series for the first time. We did one over Rambo, which was our first retrospective, and we did a look back over that, so go ahead and check that out. This is over our second retrospective series of the Hannibal Lecter films, and we started that in November 2016 and ended it April 2017. So it was around a year and about 2.5 months ago, per se. So we thought we would take the time to go ahead and look back on our thoughts on the film, if they've changed over time, if our ratings have changed, just our thoughts in general. So this will be very interesting to discuss, because my thoughts the first time around, I had some really positive thoughts and I had some really negative thoughts. So I'm interested to see if my thoughts have changed and if Alan's thoughts have changed as well.
Right, and just so you know that I'm also a little bit sick this time around, so I have a bit of a deeper voice, caught a cold I did. But yeah, I'm actually really interested to see where this conversation goes, because this is a series that's had its ups and downs, and mainly downs after Silence of the Lambs. But yeah, I mean, I know we spent, at the time when we recorded Silence of the Lambs, it was like, when we finished recording, it was 2 hours and like 45 minutes. And of course, we edited that down to about 2.5. But still, this is a very interesting series to kind of go back and look at again.
Well, of course, these are based off of books originally by William Thomas Harris III, very prestigious. He was born in 1940, and his birthday's coming up April 11th, which makes him 78 years old.
Wow.
So happy early birthday, Thomas Harris.
Yeah.
Well, Manhunter was the very first movie in the series, and that was released August 15th, 1986. And Manhunter is based off of Thomas Harris's, technically, I believe it's his second novel, but it's the first in the Hannibal series. It's called Red Dragon. And the reason it wasn't originally called Red Dragon is because Dino De Laurentiis, who was producing Manhunter, had recently put out a movie with Dragon in the title, and it kind of flopped, and he didn't want people to associate his next movie with that. Hence, we get the title Manhunter, with a very 80s looking poster and 80s music and hair and clothes and whatnot. And that was the first movie we watched, and it was not the first movie I had seen, though. Yeah. I had seen The Silence of the Lambs before. I had seen that maybe a couple times, and a funny story about Silence of the Lambs. I remember I was channel surfing once, and for some reason, Silence of the Lambs missed the parental lock. This is when I was younger. I don't know how old. I was probably like 10 or 11.
Oh, no.
And I flipped it on, and it was Buffalo Bill's dancing scene.
Oh, no.
I changed the channel so fast, so I was kind of scared of it, and I knew my dad had seen it, and he said it was just an extremely dark movie, and I ended up picking up the Blu-ray, and I'm not going to give my thoughts on it yet, but, because we're talking about Manhunter. So, that's the first one I saw. Manhunter came out August 15th, 1986, and it has a 7.2 on IMDb, which is pretty good.
Yeah, that is relatively it's relatively high, I would say.
As for the box office goes, it is actually adjusted for inflation, because I feel that's only fair, since this series goes from the 80s to the late 2000s. It's the lowest grossing movie of them all.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a little bit of sense. Manhunter, let's be honest, is kind of an interesting name for a movie. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense when you watch it, but at the same time, people, I guess it doesn't really grab the attention of somebody who was a moviegoer and be like, oh, Manhunter, that sounds interesting, versus Silence of the Lambs, where it's just like, what does that mean, you know?
That's very true. Manhunter is an incredibly generic title.
Yeah.
And I don't even think Red Dragon is that generic of a title. It makes you wonder, okay, what is this about? Is this about a real dragon? Is this... I don't know, and especially going off the poster, it looks very weird and mysterious.
Right.
The poster for Manhunter, I think, is terrible.
I think it's fine. I mean, it captures what the movie's about, but like you said, it's a pretty generic poster. I mean, it's colorful. It's got those dark blues and blacks and such, but yeah, I mean, it's overall, I guess.
Yeah, adjusted for inflation, it grossed about $21.3 million at the box office. I think without inflation, it was only like $3 million.
That's not good. That's really not good.
The audience, according to CinemaScore, audiences gave it a B.
I mean, it could be worse. It could be worse.
Yeah, that tells me, especially like according to CinemaScore standards, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's not great. It's just fine.
Right.
Have you watched it since we first watched it?
You know, I have not, but there were multiple times where I almost have. In fact, I even had the Blu-ray in my hand about to purchase it. It was like $8 at Vintage Stock. And I had it in my hand, and I said, maybe I'll get this. And then I found something else, and then I didn't buy it. So... yes, no, I have not gone back and watched it yet, but I'm planning on in the future soon, actually, to go back and watch it. I am really curious to see what my thoughts are returning to it a year later from now.
What did you rate it?
Well, okay, when we originally reviewed it, I gave it a 7, and I basically all of my criticisms I gave, I still stand by, and I still think that everything I said is pretty valid. I will still give it a 7. I think my rating is still not going to change yet. I really want to go back and watch it again sometime and just see how have I changed in terms of viewing this more as a film than back when we were starting SSG and viewing it back then with my very small goggles that I had on at the time. So it's still a 7 for me. I still remember enjoying it, and I really want to go back and watch it again. I just don't have a copy of it with me to do that with yet.
I will be honest, listeners. I shut the movie off, and there was probably about 30 minutes left to go. And from just like since I had nearly seen almost all of the movie, I was. At the time of shutting it off, I was in the 5s for it, but since I didn't see the whole movie, I don't feel like I can rate it. So whenever I shut a movie off, it becomes an automatic not recommend. So I remember we were pretty opposite on this.
Yeah.
Because you enjoyed it, and I found it to be very interesting to begin with, and then it just got to be so boring that I didn't even care to find out the resolution. That's why I shut it off. And here at Silver Screen Guide, if you shut the movie off, that's where you end the podcast. The other host can keep going, but so I remember that was the very first podcast, and I think the only one ever since, where I have shut the movie off. Well,
there was one more actually. It was for Hannibal, I think. We both shut that one off.
That's right.
Yeah. And we'll get to that one here in a sec. Yeah.
That is correct, actually. But otherwise, yeah. So you continued on and you finished up the podcast without me. That was the first time that I ever done one by myself. And I had to do some serious editing on that one because I would just ramble on and go down different paths and said, wait, where was I going with this? Oh, whatever. And I just start back over and do something else. So yeah, I mean, yeah, we had two complete different ends on this, and I really want to know what you think, kind of returning to it and maybe watching that last half an hour and seeing if that maybe pays the way for you giving it a higher score or not. It's very unlikely that I would return to Manhunter because of Red Dragon.
That's fair.
But I'll save my thoughts for Red Dragon in just a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the next one we got is the incredible Silence of the Lambs. And we got that about 6 years.
Yeah.
It was about 5 or 6 years later. Silence of the Lambs came out February 14th on Valentine's Day.
It's a perfect movie for Valentine's Day. Perfect.
Oh, man. Hopefully, not too many people took their dates to see that one.
Yeah.
That would have been... Unless they enjoy that, but it's not a very romantic movie, I would say.
It's definitely not a romance. I mean, well, I guess technically, but that's not what the whole genre of the movie is.
Ooh, yeah. Well, this movie was incredible and just so incredibly acclaimed. It holds an 8.6 on IMDb.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I don't know, number 23 maybe in the top 250 or whatever on IMDb. It's huge.
Yeah, I think this is our highest rated movie that we've reviewed on IMDb, like just at all.
That's very possible, and that's probable. Yeah. And it was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, and it was the third film in history, still this way, still to date, to win the Big Five. So it won for producing, directing, acting, and screenwriting.
That's a big feat.
Oh, yeah. So, Demi won for directing, Ted Talley for the screenplay, Anthony Hopkins won, absolutely deserved to win.
Absolutely.
Jodie Foster won. That's interesting. I think she did it very well, but I would have to see the other. I'm not familiar with the other nominees, for her, but still, that is huge. The only other movies to do it are, It Happened One Night, which came out in 1934.
Mm-hmm.
That was fairly early on in the history of the Academy Awards, and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, 1975, did the same thing.
Also a great movie.
And the audiences really enjoyed it. They gave it an A-. I'm a little surprised. I'm surprised it didn't get at least an A.
Yeah, that is kind of surprising. It's just right above Manhunter in terms of cinema score. That's interesting because Silence of the Lambs, I feel like, would have engaged its audience more. At least I would sure think so.
Right. So technically, it's 2 scores above. I believe. No. Yeah, 2. It is 2 above. But anyways, have you returned to this one, Alan?
I think I actually may have. Oh man, I can't remember if I have or not. If I have or haven't. I've seen it so many times that I feel like I have. I may have. I actually can't remember. I don't. Although I don't think I actually did. I mean, the thoughts we had on that in the podcast remain the exact same. This is still an incredible movie. And in fact, my thoughts on it have changed slightly since we did the podcast, and it has kind of moved into my top favorite movies just of all time, just because it is just so not only influential, but one movie that I always think of a lot when I think of a crime drama. And since I'm a kind of a sucker for crime dramas, it fits just perfectly into that category. So yeah, I mean, I haven't returned to it, but I actually, funny story, I was... Once again, same day when I had the Manhunter Blu-ray in my hand, I also held the Criterion Collection for Silence of the Lambs that had just come out, and that is whatever cover they picked for that was a perfect cover because it looks gorgeous, and I really want that, except it's like $30, and I don't have that kind of money currently. So I would love if I was to have any movie on Criterion Collection, it would be that one right now, just because it is just one of my favorites. So, still for me, 10 out of 10. I love this movie to death, and it's fantastic. If you haven't seen it, you need to go see it. It's just, for me, it's one of those just definitive films, just in general.
This really, I believe, propelled the series to become what it is today. This was a defining role for Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. Like, he is Hannibal Lecter, and that's what made it so famous was his performance in this movie. Everybody makes a joke and quotes the line about your liver and fava beans with the nice Chianti. You hear that repeated a lot in pop culture. So this movie was huge, and of course, adjusting for inflation, this movie is the highest grossing one domestically. And I should say, overall, like even without inflation, this movie is basically $1 billion franchise. It's made him $1 billion.
Yeah.
It is huge, and I'd say that's thanks to Silence of the Lambs.
Oh,
and
yeah. Easy.
Oh yeah, and I do own the Blu-ray. I have seen it a number of times, and I did not give it a 10. I gave it a 9. I just really, it's a great movie. I absolutely love it, and it absolutely deserved the awards it won. I think it's very interesting though that it won Best Picture of the year.
Yeah,
that's pretty
that is very
shocking.
interesting. Now, do you know what else was released that year that was up for Best Picture nomination?
I do believe the year before Dances with Wolves won, which is night and day different.
Right. Oh, yeah, okay, so here it is. Best Picture, Silence of the Lambs, that one won. Beauty and the Beast, Bugsy, JFK, and The Prince of Tides, all up for nominations. Beauty and the Beast, that's interesting.
I have actually not seen JFK. That's an Oliver Stone movie, which is interesting because that's played by Kevin Costner, and I'm pretty sure Kevin won the year before with Dances with Wolves. But I don't think I've even heard of The Prince of Tides, Bugsy. I'm not even too familiar with the 1991 version of Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, that Beauty and the Beast is the only one that I know on this list. Well, okay, I've heard of the movie JFK. I just haven't seen it. Yeah, the other two, Bugsy and Prince of Tides, haven't heard of them.
Very interesting. So maybe it's not a surprise that it won.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is this movie is a psychological thriller and very much a horror in very many aspects, and not very many horror movies win. I know Get Out was one of the most recent psychological thriller horror movies, although Silence of the Lambs is vastly superior to Get Out.
Yeah. In terms of just complexity overall, yeah, I would agree.
Sure.
I think one of the things that I would like to go back and change in the podcast, we spend a lot of time talking about the relationship between Hannibal Lecter and Jodie Foster's character, Sterling, which is fine, but at the same time, we spend I think maybe too much time on that relationship, and maybe we could have branched off into other places and also talked about that. Also, at least mention those things. I know we talked about a lot of stuff in that podcast, but if there was one criticism I could make for our podcast for that, I think it'd be that, because we just spent a lot of time on that relationship, which is still important. Don't get me wrong, but we spend a lot of time just talking through it and stuff like that. And maybe even I remember cutting out a bunch of chunks that we had just kind of repeated before.
Sure. I do remember spending quite a bit of time on that as well. I do think it led to some pretty good insights, so I would recommend checking out the podcast. But yeah, there was we went on for a little bit. I would like to read the book, honestly. Any of these books, that's the one I want to read.
Yeah.
And I found a really cool copy. I was at, I believe it was a bookstore in Oklahoma. I think it's called Full Circle Books. I believe that's the one. A really cool copy of the moth with like its wings spread out, and it was like on somebody's hand or something.
Ooh.
It was a really interesting copy. I'll have to see if I can find the picture of it. I believe I still have it, but that's one I would really love to return to and see if it goes deeper than the movie, because the movie does a fairly good job of representing the characters.
Oh yeah.
Well, you would think that with the success of The Silence of the Lambs, normally things are fast-tracked ASAP, especially if they gross a bunch and they win a bunch. Well, we didn't get Hannibal until February 9th, 2001. Almost 10 years later to the day.
Yeah, that's a long time to wait for a sequel, especially one where it was Silence of the Lambs that, did this good in the theater. Like you said, usually they pump one out as fast as they could, because then they keep the audience's attention and then they get more money that way. Usually, but not this time.
Well, they were not able to capture lightning in a bottle again, because on IMDb it's got a 6.8, a massive drop. Audiences gave it a C+.
That's not good.
No,
compared to Manhunter.
Oh yeah, that's bad. And It should be noted that it is the second highest grossing movie with $267 million domestically, really not far behind Silence of the Lambs. But that's pretty common normally for the sequel to be a big grosser. Normally, a lot of people go see it at first, even if it's bad, and then word of mouth, it's not good, and hence its low score and reaction.
Right. Now, it does make sense that that's number 2 in terms of making money, because it just came off of Silence of the Lambs, which is great. And then this one, of course, they're continuing the story. So it's going to do relatively well, but then come to find out it's not as good.
It was really surprising and disappointing. Jodie Foster didn't return. The director didn't return. It was pretty much all different people, except Anthony Hopkins did return, but he was about 10 years older. And in the director's chair, we got Ridley Scott, who is usually great. And it is funny because Ridley Scott would go on to his film, not him, he did not win director, but his film would go on in 2000. So the year after, I'm sorry. No, this movie came out in 2001. So the year before, Ridley Scott's movie Gladiator won Best Picture of the Year.
Right.
He was nominated for Best Director, but he didn't win. So you can see Ridley Scott would be a hot commodity. But going from a movie about gladiators to I don't know what it's supposed to be. I don't think it knows, because in the beginning, it's this weird shoot 'em up action movie, very odd direction and cinematography. It was so weird. I believe, okay, now it should be noted, I have watched Hannibal all the way through.
Right.
A long time ago. And it was slightly edited, I think. But I have still seen it all the way through. I remember, I believe at the beginning of the podcast, I said I saw Silence of the Lambs first. No, I believe I saw Hannibal first, actually.
Oh.
That's interesting. I'm just recalling this right now. This is why we're doing the look back, to remember these things.
Yes.
But regardless, I was not too enthused with Hannibal the first time around. The second time around, especially coming off the Silence of the Lambs, and we did the bonus podcast of Prisoners, which I will link to in the description below. Go definitely check out our podcast of Prisoners, which we felt was a wonderful Denis Villeneuve spiritual successor to Silence
and our
of the Lambs.
longest podcast we've ever recorded at, 3.5 hours? Yeah. You get your money's
Something
worth for
like
that.
It's around 3, yes, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah.
Anyways, I was severely disappointed. And, I've kind of got a 30-minute rule, because at the theater, if you leave within 30 minutes, then you get your money back. So I shut the movie off. I'm like, I don't care about the characters. This is totally different stuff. We got, what's her name from Jurassic Park 2?
Oh,
that we
Julianne
just
Moore.
reviewed. Julianne Moore. She is now Clarice Starling. No thanks. I'm not going to stick around to find out. So I shut it off. Automatic, not recommend.
Yeah. And this is the first time and only time so far that both of us have just shut it off. Now I did make it farther than Corbin did. I think it made it pretty close to halfway, if not over halfway, if I remember right. Basically, everything you see in the beginning just continues on for that next hour, and it's nothing impressive. And I got literally so bored that I said to myself, there is no point in me watching this, because I'm not getting anything out of it. And so, that's what caused me to turn it off as well. For me, it was just incredibly boring, and it felt like there was no vision behind it. And I still think that I haven't returned to it. I never think about this movie, and I almost forgot that it existed until we decided to do this look back. And I said, oh yeah, Hannibal. Yeah, I remember that movie. Barely. So, same with me. Automatic, not recommend. There's no reason for it to exist, honestly. And I think I mentioned that in the podcast.
Yeah, I also have not returned to it, and I probably never will return to it. There is more of a chance I would return to Manhunter than I would to Hannibal.
Ooh,
it's one of Ridley Scott's worst movies. I found it to be very bad.
Yeah. maybe someday I'll return to it just out of sheer curiosity. Years later, I don't know. I honestly, because we're both big fans of Ridley Scott, but this is not a good work for him, especially coming off of Gladiator, which was Best Picture winner. It's crazy.
Well, and it should be noted that Hannibal did star Gary Oldman, who just won his first Academy Award. He had a ton of makeup on as Winston Churchill.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible makeup, but the makeup he is wearing as Mason Verger in Hannibal, ooh, no, gross.
Not good at all. Not e. At least with Winston Churchill, you couldn't even tell that it was Gary Oldman. And this one, it's him. He physically just has a mask on.
It's disgusting.
Yeah, not good makeup.
Audiences, including us, were sorely disappointed with this movie.
Yeah,
I do think. I think it might even have a better poster. Yeah, I think Hannibal has a better poster than Silence of the Lambs. I'm just gonna say it.
Okay, I disagree with you, but okay.
Well, okay, so audiences were mad, and we got Red Dragon just a year later, September 30th, 2002. So they're going to retell Manhunter once again, but with Anthony Hopkins this time. Brian Cox and Manhunter I didn't really care for, honestly. And we get Ed Norton as Will Graham, and Red Dragon and Manhunter are nearly the same movie, except Red Dragon looks better, and I would say it's better done. And it did jump back up on the scores. It's kind of funny. It has a 7.2, the exact same score as Manhunter.
Yeah.
The only thing incredibly surprising is audiences gave Red Dragon and Silence of the Lambs the same score. They gave Red Dragon an A-.
That is very surprising, because I know that we can both agree that Red Dragon is not near the superiority of Silence of the Lambs.
Oh, no, absolutely not. And it grossed $147 million. It was the third highest grossing. And I have not returned to it. And this is the one that of all of them, my first return would be the Silence of the Lambs, because clearly I own it on Blu-ray. Of course I'm going to return to it in the future, and I'll gladly return to that one.
Yeah.
And the other one that I might return to is Red Dragon, but I kind of did return to it in a way, but I'll keep you in suspense as to how I did that. As for my rating for Red Dragon, I gave it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
It was a pretty weak recommend still, so anyway.
Yeah, I'm somewhat on the same boat as you. For me, I don't think I'll ever really need to go back and see Red Dragon again. It's kind of one of those movies that you see once and that's really it. That's kind of where I'm at. Is I've seen it now. We reviewed it. I don't really see a need for me to have to go back. Maybe someday. I don't know if I'll ever go back and watch it. But right now, I'm not really feeling that I'm gonna go back and see it again. Manhunter, I know that I would love to go back and watch that eventually. Silence of the Lambs, of course, I'll go back and watch that. It's great. So for me, I think I'm still sticking with my 6 out of 10. I think I gave it a mild recommend in the podcast, and I'll still stick by that. There are things that I remember. I think that Ralph Fiennes did a good job as Dollar Hyde. My criticisms, although, between this one and Manhunter still stand. And I think that, in my opinion, Manhunter is the superior movie between the two of them. It handles its subject matter a lot better than this one does. There are cheesy moments in Red Dragon, especially towards the end, and Ed Norton's performance is not the greatest. But it's not bad. I wouldn't say it's a terrible movie. I would still give it a slight recommend, that being that, but still, yeah, it's not bad. I was somewhat surprised coming off of Hannibal, which we both just didn't care for.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully, clearly, it's a step up from Hannibal, but still nowhere near Silence of the Lambs, because I gave Silence of the Lambs 9, you gave it a 10, we both gave Red Dragon a 6.
Right.
And so the Hannibal journey doesn't end there per se. Hannibal Rising came out February 9th, same day as the first Hannibal. except it came out about 6 years later, came out in 2007. I remember seeing the posters everywhere in 2007, that scary Hannibal mask with his little face on the front cover. It was everywhere. Kids at school were talking about it. They shouldn't have been watching it anyways. And honestly, we didn't go there for the retrospective because I had already been disappointed enough, and I don't want to see the origins of Hannibal. We don't need to know the origins of Hannibal. I hate it when they do that with movies where it's like, we ran out of ideas, let's just explain away everything. Well, that really takes a lot of the mystery out of it. So we didn't go see Hannibal. It has a B-. Audiences gave it a B-. Not the lowest, second low. And it is the lowest rated on IMDb with a 6.2, which is not good. That's bad.
Yeah.
And it only grossed $36.9 million at the box office.
Still not good.
Yeah. That's like current day money, pretty much, because this just came out. Oh gosh, came out about 11 years ago now. That's crazy.
Oh wow, yeah, that is old. That's an old movie.
And Hannibal lay dormant for, oh gosh, how long would that be? About 6 years, and that's the second longest since the gap between Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal.
Right.
It came back as a TV show on NBC, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. You said that you never got around to watching it, but that you would love to at one point, sometime in the retrospective that we did.
Well, I did actually watch the first few. I think I watched the first 5 or 6 episodes of the first season. I thought the characters were fine. It didn't really seem too focused on the characters. The guy who plays Hannibal, his name escapes me, but he is pretty famous. Mads Mikkelsen is his name. He's famous. He was probably most notably recently seen in Rogue One as Urso. And I thought he did a fine job as Hannibal. I didn't really get into the series enough to really see him, but it was all about Hannibal and Will Graham and whatnot, and it was about a bunch of other murders. And I quit watching the show after those first few episodes because I found it to be so grotesque and so off-putting. I just didn't want to subject myself to that. So I quit. I shut it off. I'm like, it's just so disgusting. I'm shocked they can even put it on TV. It's just
And to
so
be
bad.
fair, Silence of the Lambs is in and of itself so grotesque, but from then again, I haven't seen the show, but for what I'm guessing, the show is more exploitative, whereas Silence of the Lambs, it shows that stuff because it needs to. It's a show don't tell kind of a movie, but when it does tell, it's also still very effective and builds it. I can't exactly speak to the show, but that's what Silence of the Lamb does, is that it would build to that moment when you see this horrifying image, and there's a good reason for it to be there, and it's not wasted. It's not wasted time on the screen.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And with the TV show, this was basically what really sick images and deaths can we come up with. That's what the writers basically did. And it was pretty much a dime a dozen. CSI, Law and Order, whatever, CSI Miami, Dexter. There's a million of these shows on TV.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't really do anything different, except we just had more notable characters. And so I laid the show on the shelf. I didn't care to ever return to it, but I actually did return to it just a couple of days before this look back. I jumped all the way ahead to season 3, and I should note it was canceled after season 3. I just can't see how anybody would really care for this show. I know there were some loyal, devoted fans that really wanted Netflix or Amazon to pick it back up. That's possible. I heard there is some talk of that. But anyway, I went to the very end of season 3 because, well, technically I believe actually Mason Verger, the character from Hannibal, is introduced in season 2. He comes back in season 3. That storyline's done. I didn't care to find anything out about that. But there's like a 7-episode arc of Red Dragon. It's all of the paintings, the Great Red Dragon, the woman clothed in the sun, blah, blah, blah. And the final episode is called The Wrath of the Lamb, which I was wondering if it had any connection to the Silence of the Lambs story, but I don't believe it did. I believe what the creator wanted to do was make season 4. He was going to bring in a new Clarice Starling, and they were going to have a Silence of the Lambs season, which I definitely would have watched. Okay, I would have watched that.
Yeah, that sounds like it'd be interesting.
But the 7-episode arc, I watched the first 2 episodes, and that's all I made it into it, because it was crazy boring. And, okay, that was the 3rd time that I have seen the Red Dragon, and the 3rd time it's been told, which I can't even understand, because it's not even the most popular story. The Manhunter story was fine, first around, or Red Dragon story, whatever you want to call it. I found it interesting the first time around. The second time around, I was like, okay, this is fine. And then the 3rd time around, I was really disappointed with the TV show, because little dialogue, it was basically I was like, this is the exact same story beats of Red Dragon. Literally the exact same, except it's stretched into almost 7 hours.
Right.
No, thank you. I'm not going to do that. It's more this really artsy type of show where they just want to look really good with the camera and their way they set up their shots and whatnot. I don't care. I really didn't care that much about the Red Dragon story to see to it fruition, because I've already seen it twice, pretty much.
And yeah, and that is a fair point to bring up, is it sounds like it's a classic case of milking it for all it's worth.
Right.
Now, to be fair, Red Dragon and Manhunter are not the same movie. It's very clear they have 2 different directions in terms of wanting to tell the story. That being said, Red Dragon does take some liberties when comparing it to Manhunter. Now, of course, I haven't seen the show, but like I said, there's no beating around the bush. This is the 3rd time that the Red Dragon story has been told, and from what I hear, it's the exact same thing has been told twice before. And it just sounds like they're just milking this for as much as they can. And after the second time around, I can see, because it had been years, no one really saw Manhunter, and so they came out with Red Dragon, a more recent telling of it, and that makes a bit more sense to me. But that was in what year was Red Dragon released? That was like what,
2002.
Okay, 2002, yeah. And now we have the TV show, which is pretty new. I don't know. There doesn't really seem to be a need for that. I can see Manhunter to Red Dragon. I can see that. But not Red Dragon to a TV show. A 7-episode long retelling, again, of the same story we've already had.
It was pretty much the same exact story beats as the other one, but it was much longer because it's over 7 episodes. And so I watched 2 episodes is close to 2 hours, and I fell asleep at the very end of the second one because it's so boring. They barely say anything, and I just don't really care that much for the story. The Dollar Hyde doesn't say anything for the entirety of the first and second episode. It's mostly just images of him writhing around, getting his tattoo, pasting things. I don't know. I didn't find Will Graham's character to be very interesting, or Hannibal. No thank you. Yeah. Very graphic, bloody violence. It kind of showed all of it, and they're just trying to push the envelope with what they can do on TV. And I already know he puts the mirrors in their eyes and lines them up. It's exactly the same story beats. Right. I've already seen it. I don't care to watch a 7-hour movie of it, if that makes sense. So, no, I was disappointed. I was really hoping we would get something really good. And the other characters I just didn't care for. Dr. Chilton was in it, except he was nowhere near as good as the guy in Silence of the Lambs. So anyway, that was a wash, and honestly, I'm ready to give you my average rating and recommendation for the whole series.
Yeah, same here.
Okay, so sadly, the Hannibal Lecter series entirely gets a 4 out of 10. it's a solid not recommend for me. I averaged out my scores. For every not recommend, I took off 2 points. That's how I technically arrived at a 3.5, but I went ahead and rounded it up to a 4. So yeah, I'm sorry. The only worthy one I would say out of all of these worth seeing is The Silence of the Lambs. Skip everything else. Otherwise, the series is a solid not recommend. And I'm really disappointed about that because Silence of the Lambs is so great. So I was hoping all of these would be great too. And I didn't know what to expect, but it's not good.
Yeah. I'm a bit higher in my score. Just averaging the ones that I rated, I've got a 7.6 repeating. So it's basically an 8.
Wow.
That's still a recommend, but that I haven't taken off points for the ones I didn't recommend. So taking off, you said you took off 3 points for the ones you didn't recommend?
No, just 2.
Just 2 points? Okay, so taking off 2 points, I arrive at a 4, a 3.6 repeating. So the same score as you. So for me, I'm still going to go ahead and give it a recommend, the series as a whole. Slight recommend, which, like you said, I hate to have to say that because Silence of the Lambs is just so good. And then you've got a repeat in there with Manhunter and Red Dragon, that are basically the same story almost. So it's really sad that this series that we both at least love one of them, which is regarded as one of the great classics now, and one of the great modern classics, that being Silence of the Lambs. It's kind of sad that this series has just been mostly downs for a lot of the audience. I still really enjoy Manhunter. I still think that if you want a more modern telling of the story with some slightly better pacing, you can go ahead and watch Red Dragon. That one is going to engage you a bit more than Manhunter would, but they're both not stellar, and that's versus Silence of the Lambs, which is. And the one that I had to shut off, which we both shut off, is honestly the worst of the series that I've seen so far. And I'm, like you said, I'm scared to go watch Hannibal Rising because, number one, there's no reason for us to know the origin story of Hannibal Lecter. That's really cool just to not know in general. Number two, they're once again milking this for just all that it's worth. I mean, Silence of the Lambs is incredible. So, of course, they're going to try and get as much money out of it. But I feel like there are more stories to tell like this than what we're given. Not just with Hannibal Lecter, but just with this kind of aesthetic in general. There are so many more stories that we can do, but for whatever reason, we're just not branching out to those areas, and we're just kind of doing repeats and stuff like that. And it's kind of sad. I would still give it a slight recommend to watch this series. I'll say this, it's pretty good thriller overall. In terms of everything that I've seen, it's pretty good thriller, pretty good crime drama, and that's the kind of stuff that I'm always into. So if you like that stuff, I think you'll like this series as a whole. Silence of the Lambs is definitely the highest on this list. Manhunter I still find to be engaging, but overall, it's kind of sad that this is the overall rating for one movie that's fantastic, and the rest that are just good to bad.
So my order of the movies would be Silence of the Lambs, Red Dragon, Manhunter, and Hannibal.
And for me, pretty similar, just swap around Manhunter and Red Dragon. So mine goes Silence of the Lambs, Manhunter, Red Dragon, Hannibal, then Hannibal Rising at the bottom. But we haven't seen it, so I guess this is not really put on the list.
Well, thank you, listeners, for joining us on our Hannibal Lecter SSG Lookback. I had a good time discussing it. I'm glad we got to revisit it.
Yeah, same here.
And I'm really looking forward to doing more lookbacks as the retrospectives kind of ripen in age a little bit. More people will get to listen to them that way, and then between that time span, our thoughts will change. Maybe the IMDb ratings will change like they did with one of the Rambo movies. People's minds change in general, and it's good to be able to look back on our thoughts, see if we've revisited the movies what's going on with them. And so I'm really glad we got to go back with the Hannibal movies because I really do enjoy Silence of the Lambs, but it was interesting to put it into perspective and see my average rating for the series is a 4, which is pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, Alan felt the same way. So we were both in the same boat, and I think we were not expecting that at all when we set out to do this retrospective series.
Right. And I know that one of the things that we just really want to do is know, okay, well, how much did we take away? And now Silence of the Lambs, seeing that we've seen it so many times, both of us, we take away a lot, especially reviewing that, because now we get to go just dive in even deeper to a story that we already love. And with Manhunter, I realized this is the first time that I've realized that I took away a lot more from Manhunter than I thought I would. And I wasn't thinking that would happen at all when I first even thought of this Lookback series.
Well, make sure to subscribe on social media. We get updates on Twitter and Facebook, email, any way that you prefer. You can subscribe to us that way. Go to your favorite podcast aggregator, subscribe to us through there. Make sure to leave us a 5-star rating and share it with your friends. We love talking about movies, and we love especially talking about movies with you guys too. We've got a bunch of new content coming your way. We are going to be starting our Cloverfield retrospective very soon, and we're in the middle of Jurassic Park and Halloween, so we're both looking forward to continuing those and seeing where those movies go. And we just really appreciate you guys listening. We appreciate the downloads and the shares and the likes and everything. We're looking to really keep growing Silver Screen Guide, so make sure to definitely share it with your friends and family who love movies. And even if they don't love movies, still share it with them, and maybe they'll become movie lovers too. And that's always great. Make sure to check out our 2018 post-Oscars discussion, where we break down basically all of the most major important categories, except for documentaries and the short films. We did not get around to seeing those, but the other big ones everybody knows we did review, and we gave our thoughts on those. We sat down and watched them, and so make sure to go download that and check that out, see what we're thinking about the Oscars this year. And we've got tons of great stuff in the archives. Check those out as well. But until next time, listeners, keep watching some great movies, and we're going to be bringing you some more great movie reviews very soon.
This is a very interesting series to kind of go back and look at again. I guess it thought I said, "Hey Siri." Well, they're continuing the story, so it's going to do relatively well, but then come to find out, it's not as good.
No, it was really...
That one hurt.